Hello, Raptors fans, and welcome back to Raptors Report. Today we're going to be discussing the Raptors game against the New York Knicks that happened in front of everybody. It was the only game that was scheduled to be played in the NBA, and that was the game that all basketball fans kind of had to turn their attention to, and we'll discuss that. But before we do that, and in light of the Scottie Barnes ankle injury, of which I'm not exactly sure the severity, we should talk about the direction of the Toronto Raptors, what we should be looking at in the near-term future and also the long-term outlook for this club. Because with Scottie Barnes going down with injury, I think that the team is going to struggle in a number of areas. The first of which is defensively. Scottie Barnes is a very good defender. He's a very large body for the Toronto Raptors who can protect the paint. He can come out and guard on the perimeter. He grabs defensive rebounds, can block shots, grab steals, do all of that good stuff. He's an important part of the Toronto Raptors rim defense package along with Jakob Poeltl. And the Toronto Raptors have actually been a competent defensive team, even though they're young and there's some players on the team that aren't exactly great on defense. The combination of having Jakob Poeltl and Scottie Barnes at the back end has really improved the Toronto Raptors defense and made them a team that can get stops in the half court. And with Scottie Barnes being injured, I've heard that the x-rays are negative, so it might not be a very long time, but in those games, I feel like the Toronto Raptors defense will decline. And that is even if you account for them running more Jonathan Mogbo, who is a good defender, similar sized player, kind of a similar, like a break in case of emergency Scottie Barnes. Adding him to lineups will probably lessen the blow, but at the same time, you are not going to be getting him in bench lineups where he would have been playing otherwise. And I don't think that right now he's as impactful a defender as Scottie Barnes is. And then on offense, I mean, maybe you could put him in a similar category as Scottie Barnes in a defensive impact. You can't compare the offensive impact that Scottie Barnes has with Jonathan Mogbo. The Toronto Raptors are losing one of their best creators. Their offense is going to be a lot less dynamic because it'll be moving back toward the RJ Barrett, Jakob Poeltl pick and roll, which has been effective for the Raptors, but at the same time, not as potent as having both Scottie Barnes and RJ Barrett as capable ball handlers in the half court. So the Toronto Raptors are simply just going to be a worse team overall now that Scottie Barnes is sitting out. And it's very, very discouraging for him to have that freak injury where he got hit in the face by Jokic's elbow and had to miss time. And then he twisted his ankle. Thankfully, it's a different ankle than the one he injured a few seasons ago when he got his foot stepped on by Joel Embiid. But hard news to stomach. The Toronto Raptors have not been healthy all season. They've been missing key role players, key star players, players that are an important part of the Toronto Raptors' future. All of those players have missed substantial time, and we really have not gotten to see the team at full strength, see what they're capable of, what the team looks like when the star players, the top players, and the key role players all get to play together. Is there innate synergy? And not only that, being able to evaluate whether there is dyssynergy is also very useful for a club. If two players don't play well together, you want to be able to know that. I'm not going to say that they don't play well together because I haven't seen very much of it, but let's say, what if Immanuel Quickley and Scottie Barnes are not a match for the team? What you're doing when both players are injured or one player is injured, another is healthy, and you don't get to see those players play together is that you don't get to evaluate them in tandem. You don't get to see if they're a poor fit. You don't get to make the decision on whether to move on from Immanuel Quickley or I was about to say Scottie Barnes, but I think when push comes to shove, I think we know what the solution would be. You want to be able to ascertain that the earlier, the better. You don't want to have to wait until their third season playing together in order to figure out that those two guys don't work. And I'm not obviously not saying that those two are not going to work together. That's just a hypothetical argument that you have to consider when you don't get to see players play together. You cannot really evaluate without watching game tape, without seeing how they play next to one another. It's so frustrating that the young core of Scottie Barnes, Immanuel Quickley, RJ Barrett, and Grady Dick have really not been able to play with one another. I think that if they have played together, it's probably only for a couple of minutes, just because of the rotating nature of the injuries on this team. So this is looking more and more and more like a lost season. A season where the Toronto Raptors are not going to be able to compete in any meaningful way. It looks as if even the dreams of the play-in tournament in the horrendous East are slowly getting out of the picture, which is either a blessing or a curse, depending on your perspective. And there's an expression, when life gives you lemons, you've got to make lemonade. And the Toronto Raptors are part of a league where you can make lemons into lemonade. And in fact, the sourer your lemons are, the sweeter the lemonade you get to drink at the end of the season. And it's pretty obvious what I'm talking about, the NBA draft. And so even though the season has been an unmitigated disaster in terms of injuries, on a competitive basis, the team has looked competent. It looks like they are playing hard and doing the right thing. But at the end of the day, what it comes down to is the win-loss column. And unlike horseshoes or hockey, I guess, where there's wins, losses, ties, overtime ties, probably something else that I'm missing. Sorry, hockey fans. There's only two stats, wins and losses. And the Raptors have been building up in the loss column. And I know that many fans really don't want to hear it. They want the Toronto Raptors to win. They care about the culture of the team, that winning is the thing that competitive teams want to do. That's what they're watching the games for, is for the team to win games. And so there's a very big dissonance between wanting the team to win, be successful, get bragging rights, get to talk to your friends about how exciting things are, and on the other side of the coin, the team needing to be bad in order to be at the top of the NBA draft. So I'm going to lay out what I think that the strategy should be for the Toronto Raptors as the season marches along. I think that this was always going to be a rebuilding season. I don't think that there were championship aspirations from the get-go. I think that the front office wanted to see what they had with a number of players. They wanted to evaluate the younger players. They wanted to develop the younger players, give them meaningful minutes, and build their confidence and their ability and their skills in the NBA. And I think that that should still be a priority, and I don't think anything has changed there. But I think that the time for playing for wins is probably nearing the end. And what I think that the Toronto Raptors should do in the near term is to spotlight and give meaningful minutes to the veteran players on the team. So players such as Kelly Olynyk, who has played very well for the Raptors since his return. Davion Mitchell, who I think has done a good job, has really had an impressive season for the Toronto Raptors, especially on defense. And even players like Jakob Poeltl, who you don't even need to spotlight him. He has been doing it all season long and showing you what kind of player he is. Chris Boucher, I think that he's gotten some DNPs. I think with Scottie Barnes being out of the lineup, he should re-enter the lineup. It's time to start giving the veterans minutes and then looking to deal the veterans in a timely manner. I think that obviously you could wait for the trade deadline when the offers could be better, they could be worse, who knows? But I think that the Toronto Raptors should really be looking to deal the veteran players on the team, and if they can get a trade done that is satisfactory, the sooner the better. And really looking to bring in and give lots of minutes to younger players. So I don't think that it should be a prolonged process. I don't think that taking minutes away from younger players for the veterans should be something that you do for the entire season. I think that you should do it, showcase them, show that those players are still healthy, especially players that have a long track record in the league of being productive, such as Kelly Olynyk. But it's also important to consider what the return would be for those types of players. And I think in a kind of a lost season like this, where you're really looking at development time, I think that the Toronto Raptors should be perhaps kicking the tires on reclamation projects. And the Raptors have done a good job in the past of bringing in players who other teams have either drafted highly or have shined early on or had potential, but simply were not able to crack the rotation of the team. Maybe the team is too good. Maybe they didn't show enough in those flashes. It would be nice to get a couple of those players back, especially for players who aren't able to return a first-round pick worth of value. I think that there's really only one player on the team who it's realistic to expect first-round draft pick as a return for them, and that would be Jakob Poeltl. I think that Jakob Poeltl probably fetches hopefully 2 or 3 first-round picks. I think that he is a very good player. I've spoken at length about Jakob Poeltl. If you want, you can go through almost every video on this channel for the past few months, and I have a section devoted to what Jakob Poeltl brings to the table. But he's one of the only veterans on the team who you could flip for first-round pick worth of value. The other players are, you're probably looking at second-round picks plus reclamation projects. One of the reasons that you would want to pick up one of those players is because the Toronto Raptors are going to be a team that has minutes to spare, especially if they were to trade. A lot of the players on the team who are veterans are bigs. Chris Boucher, not a center, but a power forward. Kelly Olynyk, he's a 4-5. Jakob Poeltl, he is a center. All of those guys, if you were to deal them, you would be looking to get a younger big in return for one of those players. And I think that that's what the Toronto Raptors should be trying to do. I think that Chris Boucher, Kelly Olynyk, Davion Mitchell, I think that some of those players should be able to fetch a reclamation big and then simply give them some time on the Toronto Raptors, try and integrate them into the offense, see what they can bring to the table. And if they are able to become a meaningful role player, that's great. That would be a really good thing for the Toronto Raptors to be able to bring on board. And if they don't, well, nothing ventured, nothing gained. I think that trying to get something like that for one of the non-Poeltl veterans would be a good return. And then for the rest of them, I think second-round picks are something that you could expect back. I think also taking back salary is something that could increase the value of the players that you're receiving. It could increase the value of the picks that you're getting back. The Toronto Raptors should be looking to try and make those types of deals. Some players are overpaid. Some players, their salary doesn't fit with the current team that they're on. If the Toronto Raptors want to get better value back, that could also be an avenue to take. Waving the white flag this early in the season, it seems absurd. It seems crazy. There's about 65 to 70% of the season left to play. The majority has still yet to be played. But the Toronto Raptors are pretty deep underwater. 7-18 is a poor record. This is not something where the Toronto Raptors should be wasting the record that they have right now. They should not be taking for granted the losses that they have, because losses in a certain sense are currency. They are something that allow you to purchase a valuable asset at the end of the season. And trying to get back to 500, trying to win as many games as possible, while it would feel good in the short term, it would probably be something that I would be more comfortable with if the Toronto Raptors were closer to 500 and not so injured. I would be more comfortable with. However, I think that this position that they are currently in, I think that it's more prudent to go in the opposite direction. That's just my opinion. But there are a couple of cool development stories. There are a couple of cool performances, especially from last night. So I think that this might be a good jumping off point to get into those player evaluations. So why don't we start with that? And we have to start with RJ Barrett, because he had a wonderful performance against his former team, the New York Knicks. He had 30 points on 24 shots. He was 3 of 7 from 3, 8 rebounds, 4 assists, a steal, and 3 turnovers. I think that he was wonderful offensively, that is. I think that there are still kinks to work out on defense, but we're not going to devote too much time. I've spoken about it at length in other videos. We should celebrate his performance that he had, because I think that there were a lot of really positive things I saw from RJ Barrett. I think that the fact that he was scoring against OG Anunoby, who was the primary defender on RJ last night, I think that that speaks volumes to his ability to create and be productive against elite defense. I think that one thing that was working in his favor is that Karl-Anthony Towns is not an elite rim protector. He is not a guy that is going to alter or swat a ton of attempts around the rim. And as we all know, that is where RJ is best. That is his zone, the paint. He likes to get into the paint and he likes to finish. And he has struggled against some of the top-level rim protectors in the league, and Cat is not one of those. So I think that it was a good night for him, a really good night. I think that he showed pretty much all of the aspects of his game on offense. 3 for 7 from 3. That's a really good mark. He was catching and shooting for the most part, not a lot of off the dribble shots, which I think is perfect for him. He is a good catch and shoot 3-point shooter. And then when he has the ball in his hands, he and Jakob Poeltl, as they have been all season long, are a very good tandem. They create a lot of space for the other players on the floor, and they can make it happen in the half court. He is a very consistent driver to the rim. And I was extremely pleased, especially that he had a really awesome alley-oop, and he really got up there. I think that might be the highest I've ever seen him jump, catching that alley-oop from Jakob Poeltl. I was super impressed seeing him catch the ball that high and throw it down. I think that he has kind of emerged. He's not that consistent yet. We've seen him oscillate back and forth between good performances, forgettable performances, poor performances, but he's had a lot of 30-point games this season, and that's not easy to do. That is not easy to do. When you're on the scouting report, other teams are going to try and stop you, and they're going to load up on you. They're going to make sure that you can't go and do what you're most comfortable doing. But he has been able to put points on the board this season. His averages are looking good. I think his percentages have been improving. I think he's getting to the point where he is being efficient enough on offense that some of the sins on the other end of the floor can be forgiven because, yeah, I wasn't going to talk about it, but maybe I will. The help defense is still an issue with RJ Barrett, but we'll save that for another video. Next up, we'll talk about Scottie Barnes. Well, I'll keep this section brief because he hurt himself and I don't want to, bum everybody out by saying that he was having a really good night, which he was. He was really getting it going, and the Toronto Raptors were winning when he went down with injury. I think that they had a good chance of winning the game if he didn't go out. He is a clutch player. He is a player that likes to show up in the big moments. He plays with a lot of energy and gives the team a lift. He was having an efficient night. He was 3 of 8 from 3, 15 points on 11 shots in only 23 minutes, 5 rebounds, 3 assists, 2 turnovers. He was playing very well for the Raptors, and he was looking like he was rounding into form and really showing up and being a force for the Toronto Raptors. And hopefully he can get back soon because I want to see him. I love watching him play. He is a joyful player who plays the right way, and he brings a lot to the Toronto Raptors. So hopefully he's back soon. Next up, we'll mention Jakob Poeltl. 10 points for him, 12 rebounds, 4 assists, a steal, 2 blocks, 1 turnover, 4 of 8 from the field. I thought he was great. I thought he had a really strong defensive game. I felt like he was able to track Cat all over the floor and break up the Cat and Brunson pick and roll. He was a big part of that. He and Ochai Agbaji did a very good job on those two, especially before the fourth quarter. I know Cat hit a bunch of shots late in the game, but I think he did a good job. He had a really nice block on OG Anunoby. He just erased it at the rim. He was moving his feet well, except on one of those final possessions, the hard double against Jalen Brunson, when they had Davion Mitchell out guarding Jalen Brunson, which I think is a good thing. I don't think you really need to bring 2 to the ball, and especially not the center, okay? And I'll explain why. One of the things about centers is that their foot speed is a little slower than guards. They can't track players as effectively on the perimeter, and Jakob Poeltl is pretty good at moving his feet. He's one of the better centers at moving his feet and being able to guard on the perimeter. However, part of that is because he's very long and he can recover to shooters, so he can gap players a little bit. When you bring them out for the hard double, what happens is that the big will slip to the basket, and then the guard will simply use the double with the center to screen his man, and that's exactly what happened. So they brought 2 to the ball, and then Brunson simply attacked Jakob Poeltl's side, and Poeltl essentially acted as a screen, and Davion Mitchell was not able to stay in front of Jalen Brunson. So I don't like that play call. I'm not sure if it was Jakob Poeltl's decision. I'm assuming it was the bench's, but I've never liked that call, having the big come out and double. But I think he did a good job outside of that. I think that he was protecting the basket, grabbing rebounds. He had 6 offensive rebounds, which is huge. That is a really, really impressive number. The Knicks, outside of Karl Anthony Towns, are pretty small. I mean, they are not a huge team up front. They have a lot of large wings, and OG Anunoby is very sturdy, Josh Hart is a very good rebounding swing. But in terms of the raw size, Jakob Poeltl is kind of the biggest guy on the floor, and he did a really good job of grabbing offensive rebounds. But what can you do? I think he had a good game, but it wasn't enough. Next, we'll go to Ochai Agbaji, and I've got to give Ochai Agbaji some flowers today. I know I've been saying that he's not an elite defender and this and that, and maybe being a little critical of his defense. I thought his defense last night was very good. He was the primary defender on Jalen Brunson. He and Davion Mitchell kind of took turns with Jalen Brunson, but he did a really good job of staying in front of Brunson, contesting shots, tracking him on the perimeter, staying with him in the pick and roll, going under the screen when necessary. He and Jakob Poeltl really did a very good job covering the Knicks' number one play, which is the Jalen Brunson, Karl Anthony Towns pick and roll. So I will just simply give him a passing grade just based on that, because I think that Jalen Brunson is one of the most dangerous guards in the NBA. And if you're able to keep him under control, Brunson had 20 points on 13 shots. He was 4 of 8 from 3. So it's not like he shut him down, but part of that is simply making him give the ball up. I think he did a pretty good job there, and I'm not going to be too critical of him. I don't think he had a very good game on offense. Perhaps with Scottie Barnes out of the lineup, his usage can go up and he can start shooting the ball a little bit more, get more into a rhythm, but he had 7 points on 9 shots, which isn't very good. He was 1 of 4 from 3. He had a couple of open looks that didn't drop for him. 5 rebounds, 4 assists, a steal, and a turnover. So he was kind of packing the score sheet in multiple different ways, so it can't be too harsh. Grady Dick had a tough shooting night. I was praising him for his confidence early on because he was really taking a bunch of shots and going for it. But unfortunately for him, he did not have the range last night, and he did take a couple of open shots that didn't drop. He had a couple of drives where I felt like the process wasn't great. He went way too fast trying to get the ball up on a certain possession where he could have taken a little bit more time. He, I think, should have tried to dunk a drive where he really got a full head of steam going to the basket, and he went instead for a layup and then crashed into the cameraman. It wasn't a very good night for Grady Dick. I'm liking his aggressiveness. I think he's made strides on defense, although he had some issues last night. So one of the issues with Grady Dick has been his screen navigation, as I've mentioned in the past. I think his isolation defense is pretty good. I think his closeouts are pretty good. Screen navigation is still an issue for him. Mikal Bridges is a good shooter, and he exploited the fact that Grady could not get around the screens by making a ton of three-point shots. Mikal Bridges was 5 of 8 from 3. A lot of that because he was shooting open shots, and Grady Dick was a culprit there. So not a good night for Grady Dick, unfortunately. Hopefully he can bounce back. Off of the bench, we've really got to talk about Jakob Poeltl, because this was his first really standout performance from a scoring perspective. And I think that a lot should be made of how impressive he was, because he was probably the second best player in this game. And the points that he scored were from a variety of different locations, not the least of which was the three-point line, where he has struggled this season. Jakob Poeltl has been shooting, very poorly the past couple of games since returning from his shoulder injury. So it's not unexpected that perhaps a shoulder injury would require some time to get your shooting form back in shape. But last night was a very positive step in that direction. He was 3 of 7 from 3. 19 points on 12 shots. Very impressive. He was 4 of 5 from the free throw line. He had a rebound, 2 assists, and unfortunately 2 turnovers, but he got all of that done in 22 minutes. I think perhaps he should have received more time toward the end of the game, just because he was one of the Raptors' more consistent scorers last night, and I think that they should have given him a bit more runway, perhaps playing him over Grady Dick. But his process has always stood out. I think that what he does on offense and his confidence and his moves have looked good. I think his first step is very nice from a guard. I think he's pretty explosive off of the dribble. He had a number of drives where he was able to get into the paint. He had a couple of very nice crossovers. He crossed over Mikal Bridges and got into the lane and hit a really nice looking floater. He had a bunch of hesitation moves and pump fakes. He was able to score on the inside. He was able to catch and shoot. He had a really good possession where he caught the ball in transition with no hesitation and just shot the ball from the corner. I think that he has a really nice looking stroke, and I think that he has some ball skills. I think that at his age, we're starting to see him expand his game and get comfortable. The confidence is clearly there. It's not as if this is Grady Dick 2.0, where you started to see if he wasn't having a good night, he was kind of squeezing the ball a little too much. He was passing up shots and all of that sort of stuff. Jakobi seems to be a lot more determined to simply shoot his way through it, which is what you want to see, especially if the results are like last night where the shots are going in. That creation off of the dribble and using screens has been a pleasant surprise. I think that he has the ability to score. I think that having that outside in game where you can use the ability to shoot to drive into the paint, that's a very useful skill for a guard to have. And I think that the Toronto Raptors, this pick is looking a lot more understandable. I think Jakob Poeltl, if you watch the highlights from when he was at Baylor, the guy has a really nice looking shot. And even though the percentages were not in his favor, especially at the end of the year, he kind of went into a slump, but the shot mechanics were good. And the creation ability, the nascent ball handling ability, those all look like positives. There's a lot of things when you watch his game where he's ticking the boxes for a perimeter player in the NBA. Foot speed, ball handling ability, and shooting. Those are probably the biggest hard skills that you would want from a guard at the NBA level. And it seems as though Jakob Poeltl has those three things that make him a very intriguing prospect. And I want to see him continue to get more shots. If the Toronto Raptors are going to move in a rebuilding direction, I think that Jakob Poeltl will be a main beneficiary of that, where he will be able to play through his mistakes a little bit more. He'll be able to pop those minutes up, get those minutes up, and maybe start making a push for the Rookie of the Year, because this draft class has not been very impressive. Jared McCain, who is obviously the front runner right now, has been on a little bit of a slide recently. He's coming off of the bench now, and he's had some nights where he's been not as impressive as he was at the beginning of the season, but I think that he could, if Jakob Poeltl makes a strong push, he could be in those conversations for Rookie of the Year. That's obviously the dream scenario. We'd have to see a lot more nights like last night. So cross your fingers, hope for the best. And yeah, very impressed with what I saw from Jakob Poeltl last night. Next up, we will talk about Kelly Olynyk. Kelly Olynyk is one of the guys that I mentioned that could be a trade candidate for the Toronto Raptors. He has looked good in his return, especially the shooting ability. I know that it says here that he missed a three-point shot, and that's all he was credited for. He also hit essentially what was a three. It was a Kevin Durant three where his toe was grazing the three-point line and the shot went in. The refs were like Sherlock Holmes for the Toronto Raptors and Mr. Magoo for the New York Knicks when it came to fouls. They were studying everything with a fine-toothed comb that the Raptors were doing wrong and then letting the New York Knicks get away with murder. But yeah, his shooting ability has been back. He is playing the facilitator role off of the bench. He is helping run the offense. He and Jakob Poeltl had a lot of synergy last night. I think that he is doing a good job running the bench offense. He is kind of like a point guard-esque player off of the bench at the big position that you can run a lot of actions through. And he has looked very solid on the offensive end. Last night was a mixed bag for him defensively. In the first half, he was horrendous defensively. He was providing very little in terms of rim protection, and he was getting out rebounded. He was looking small. Not a very good game in the first half defensively, but in the second half, he actually did some stuff. He had a block. He had a nice steal. He was using his craftiness and his sneakiness around the basket to strip players and do all that kind of stuff. I thought he played a lot better defensively in the second half. But that's kind of what you can expect from him. He's never going to be a stopper, and sometimes he's going to just look completely overmatched on defense. But on the offensive end, I thought he had a good night. And I think that if he continues to play well for the Raptors, I think that they could receive a decent return for him. Next up, Jonathan Mogbo, who was good last night. 6 points, 7 rebounds, 3 offensive rebounds. Again, he is just continually getting those offensive rebounds. 2 assists, 0 turnovers, but 3 of 9 from the field. And finishing is starting to become an issue for Jonathan. As much as I want to give him props for being able to stretch the floor out, I think you really need to start seeing him figure out how to score on the inside. And that's been a through line for him this season, has been his kind of inability to score in the paint. And I think it's mostly that he doesn't have really a go-to move, and he doesn't have the otherworldly touch that a lot of players his size and with his skill set have, where if you just get it up on the glass or get it up on the rim, it drops through. He doesn't really have that. So he has to find something that works for him, and that could be a push shot, which I've mentioned, and maybe it's a pull-up jump shot, like a 10-foot pull-up, something that gives him a consistent move that he can use once he is in the paint, because right now that is where he has struggled. But in terms of everything else, he's bringing what you want to the table. He's a very toolsy player, and I like what I've seen. Davion Mitchell, I thought, was great. I thought he was really, really good, and he even was good on offense. 8 points on 4 shots. He was 2 of 2 from 3, hit some very timely shots on kickouts, 3 rebounds, 3 assists, a block, and only 1 turnover, and he was playing fantastic defense, getting into the passing lanes, drawing offensive fouls. He got caught for the softest foul I think I've ever seen. It was just a complete phantom call on Jalen Brunson, where he hung the gooseneck after hitting the 3 for like 3 seconds, which I think is very tasteless considering the shot was not a and one. Like, come on, have some shame. I think he played really good defense, and I thought he brought it on offense as well. So just a very good performance from him. And another veteran that the Raptors have on their roster that should probably draw some interest from teams that require better perimeter defense. He is one of the best perimeter defenders in the NBA, and the stats really back that up this season. And he really does a good job of pestering and making it difficult for teams to get into their sets. And that was the game. And I touched on it in that last section, but the refereeing was terrible. It was really, really inconsistent. It's not just the free throw differential. So the Knicks shot 8 more free throws than the Raptors, which on paper is not as egregious as, say, the 37-18 free throw differential that they had against the Mavericks. But the whistle was completely one-sided. It was all in favor of the New York Knicks. RJ Barrett, who drove into the paint again and again and again, shot 2 free throws. And one of the calls that they made where Jalen Brunson fouled RJ Barrett, and it was in the act of shooting, and it dropped through. They called it on the floor. It was side out, basically annulling the 2 points that RJ scored. And it's very disheartening to see that, because it feels like they are handing a close game to a team in a bigger market with a better record. They are getting all of the calls, and the Toronto Raptors are not. It doesn't seem fair to me. It does not seem right to me, and it's very frustrating to watch. That's the end of the rant. I'm not going to go too far into the rest of it, because what can you do? In terms of what the team did, I think that, the refrain that we've heard all season is that they played them tough and then lost in the end, and that's what happened. Again, I think RJ and Jacoby had great nights. I thought Poeltl was good. I thought Scottie Barnes had a really promising start to the evening. And then the role players played pretty well too. I thought Davion Mitchell and Ochai Agbaji did a good job on defense against one of the best offensive teams in the league. The Knicks are very difficult to stop. The only player I think that just had like a really down night that got minutes was Grady Dick. I thought he struggled on defense and on offense. The screen navigation was a big problem. I just don't think that he had a good game, but everybody else, they brought something to the table, and it's really discouraging for a number of reasons. Of course, the reffing is one of them. Scottie Barnes' injury is probably the shadow that has hung over the game and this entire analysis that I've brought to the table today. So that's obviously not very good. Up next, I was saying that it was a 7-game homestand for the Toronto Raptors, but that was before there was a scheduling change because the in-season tournament concluded with the Raptors being eliminated. And as a result, the games that would have been theirs if they had advanced in the tournament have been changed. So there was a game that was added to the schedule. They will be playing in Miami. So it's not a 7-game homestand like I said it was. There's actually a road game stuck right in there. They will be playing in Miami tomorrow at 7:30. With Scottie Barnes out of the lineup, they're going to be losing a lot of their defensive punch. The Heat have really struggled recently. But if Scottie Barnes is going to be missing the game against the Heat, I'm not sure if he's going to travel with the team. I'm assuming that this is an ankle sprain and he'll be out for at least a couple of weeks. So I don't expect him to join the team in Miami, but anything can happen. And so I'm not really that confident that they are going to beat the Heat, which is unfortunate, but I will be watching the game regardless. And I want to see some of the younger players have big nights. I want to see RJ Barrett continue his hot scoring. I want to see Grady Dick have a bounce back night. I want to see Jakob Poeltl take another step and show that he can consistently hit 3-point shots. And then I want to see the veterans get some minutes so that they can raise their trade value. As cynical as that sounds, that's kind of what I want to see. But that's the episode. Thank you for watching. Did you take anything away from it? What do you think about Scottie Barnes' injury? Am I right that this is kind of the time when you see the writing on the wall? Maybe it's time to pivot into the tanking direction? Or do you think, never say die? Don't wave that white flag. It's way too early. Let me know here in the comments and also on Twitter and Blue Sky, where you can reach me at Raps Report. Love talking to Raptors fans, replying to your comments, answering your questions, all of that good stuff. Also, leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already. Really helps out. And as always, thank you for tuning in to Raptors Report, your source for in-depth Raptors content.